I'd like to call the Monday, September 21, 2020 Oakwood City Council meeting to order. I thank all of you for coming this evening. Next, we have a recognition of Oakwood Public Safety Officer Claude McCormick. And I would like to ask Chief Hill to come down and make some opening comments, and then I think the Chief will invite Lieutenant Baggett, along with Public Safety Officer Greg Ortell, to give us a presentation about the life of Officer Claude McCormick. Welcome, Chief.
I'll keep this brief, as I want Lieutenant Baggett and Officer Ortell to give the information about Claude. You know, for generations, it has been talked about. In the 1930s, we actually lost an officer here in Oakwood in the line of duty. It's one of those things that was known within the department, but the steps or the actions were never taken to have his line of duty death properly recognized until within the last 12 to 15 months, when Lieutenant Baggett and Officer Ortell started that process. And you'll hear a little bit about what they did to get him formally recognized on the National Memorial. I think the ironic thing about tonight is as they will talk about in the presentation, Officer McCormick actually lived here at 105 Patterson, right upstairs in the apartment. So I think the irony of us having this event here tonight to recognize him, you know, is definitely, you know, a tribute to him. With that being said, I also want to recognize Carl Sukumil from MVCC, who's with us tonight. As a result of the COVID pandemic, the local Montgomery County Police Memorial was canceled this year, and they recognized 2 in the line of duty deaths. My friend Detective George Del Rio from the city of Dayton and Officer McCormick. And they did a caravan of lights, and you're going to watch a video, and it was a beautiful event that we were able to capture in front of our city building back in May. And Carl is the person behind the video that took all the footage and actually produced it. And we were able to ever have this in Claude's in memory. So with that being said, I'll invite Lieutenant Baggett and Officer Ortell up here to the podium, and they can talk more about Claude.
Officer McCormick was a patrol officer here in the 1930s. He was he rode a motorcycle, and unfortunately he was involved in an accident at 5 Points in which it was raining, and with all the weather and the wet, he lost control of his bike. He dumped his bike, and he suffered a head injury. Was taken to the hospital eventually, and he succumbed to those injuries. This initially was brought to our attention by Officer Rob Wilson, who attended a district FOP meeting, and it was brought to our attention that Claude was a line of duty death here. And so Officer Wilson came to me and said, would you mind taking this, and along with Lieutenant Baggett, to recognize him. And so that started the ball rolling, and we got that process going. So that's kind of the background.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council members, City Manager, Department heads, and community members that have taken time to come out and listen to my presentation tonight. I really appreciate that. Again, as Officer Ortell said, it came to light, and the city and the administration and the Fraternal Order of Police worked together to gather all the documentation. The city and everybody is really supportive in getting this done and helping us get him recognized in the national level. To begin that, we'll Officer Patrolman Claude McCormick in the Police Memorial is what I'd like to discuss with you this evening as I drop stuff. Claude McCormick was born in August 15th, 1888 in Atlanta, Missouri, to Patrick and Molly McCormick. Columbia, Missouri, or Atlanta, Missouri is about 70 miles north of Columbia, Missouri, and that puts us about 500 miles as the crow flies from Dayton. Around 1911, him and his wife Anna, or Maud as the census records and Dayton directories show, moved to Dayton, Ohio. Interesting about that, 2 years later you move somewhere and the whole city floods. So Dayton flood was in 1913. So just adding some local history. During the time, I found a 1920 census result that listed his mom Molly as the head of household, with Maud and Claude living there. Maud was listed as a waitress at a hospital, and Mr. McCormick was listed as an engineer. It's really been amazing to go down this history route to see what's out there. We'll see some documents that I've found or were presented to me just to get in the genealogy and really see the proof behind of where everybody's been. So just to show his work history, engineer in Missouri. When he moved to Dayton, he worked as an assembly worker. He was a machinist at Delco. We have that on his selective service card here soon. And he also was enlisted in the Army. If you've never seen one of these before, directories on the right, it's basically what the phone books used to be back before phones were really around. This is a Dayton directory from 1926 where it shows Claude worked as a grinder, and then he lived at 2909 Home Avenue. Here what you see presented before you is his registration card. The way I received it, it's actually a selective service card. So Woodrow Wilson passed the Selective Service Act in May of 1917. You can see that Claude registered in November of 1917, where he lived on National Road. And then also that he worked at Delco, which I've highlighted in red. So again, he's really been tied into a lot of this region's history before he came to work for us. After his military service, Claude returned to work as a machinist in the area until in 1930, he joined the Oakwood Public Safety Department as a motor patrol officer. The badge on the right is in a display case at the city building. Best I can recollect from the Oakwood Register picture of him, it looks like a number 5 or 6 on his badge number. I haven't been able to find that one, but the number 1 badge is currently similar or almost the exact match of what he's wearing. So if you'd like to see that and come past this public safety building sometime, there's the complete history of our badges hanging up in a nice display case. Then, as Chief alluded to, a 1930 Dayton directory has Patrolman McCormick at that point living here at 105 Patterson. Back here above me, there's actually remnants of a restroom, a sink, a mirror, and then just to the side of that, a bedroom, a closet, some flooring. But since time and use of the building has changed, the stairway, as Carol alluded to me, was originally in this room, correct? And went upstairs to the living facilities. So what the mayor said to begin, the first time having a council meeting here, is very nice to see that, it's a way to kind of honor that Patrolman McCormick and his wife lived here. This is the newspaper clipping from the Dayton Daily announcing his death, and also the actual death certificate, which made it very easy to show that he died in the line of duty. It actually shows, I can get printed copies later, but down in this area it'll actually show in the line of duty, actually listed as death by the autopsy or coroner report. He died of a subdural hematoma, which is basically a brain bleed underneath the first layer of skin in your brain. He went home sick from work that day, didn't feel better, eventually got removed to Miami Valley Hospital, where they tried to relieve that pressure, but he succumbed to those injuries and passed away. August 29th of 1933 at the age of 45. Patrolman McCormick and his wife didn't have children the best we could figure out. He did have a medical condition which seemed to limit his possibility of having children. So we tried to find a family member to, pass this along to let them know that their family member had been honored, and we were unable to go down and find any next of kin. So we did attempt that to the best of our ability. Mr. McCormick, or Patrolman McCormick, was laid to rest at Fort Leavenworth National Cemetery. That's the second oldest Army fort in the U.S. It's been operating since 1888. He was laid to rest on September 3rd, 1933. So they moved him from here back home, I'm guessing with no additional family members, and Maud, probably wanting to be closer to her family, laid him to rest somewhere closer back at home. So he's laid to rest there. Service and sacrifice. We've lost about 90 officers this year alone to traumatic injuries across the U.S. So in 1962, President John F. Kennedy established Police Memorial Day. That is always known as May 15th. That has grown over the years to include memorial services in 1982, the dedication of a memorial in Washington, D.C., and an entire week. That week is usually attended by 25,000 to 40,000 people in Washington, D.C. That was our goal, to get there and have some more personalized images from there. But again, we're all dealing with an interesting 2020, so that's been moved down the row. I do have some virtual images of the memorial when we get there. At the Police Week, they have an Emerald Society Pipe Band Memorial. They have National Police Survivors Conference, Honor Guard, and Pipe Band competitions. They also have a Unity Ride, where officers and support staff ride from Florham Park, New Jersey to Washington, D.C., which is about 222 miles. They'll have a flag like this on the back of their bike and a band that has the officer's name engraved with their line of duty death on that as well. So the survivors will get that. So we personally have that, and we'll figure out where that ends up, whether that's a display at the city building or with the Historical Society, but that'll be now part of our history as well. The bike ride ends by actually riding through the police memorial in DC. One of the events also is a why can't I think of the candle? A candle event at the National Mall. So they fill the mall with candlelight vigil, and that's a well-attended, great, event that's just very solemn and very respectful to all the officers at the time. This is the National Memorial. It's located in Judiciary Square. It's a 3-acre complex. I know you can't read the words on the front of it, so I added them to the next slide. This memorial is dedicated to all law enforcement officers in the United States of America. Inscribed on these walls are the names of those men and women who died in the line of duty. The bronze lions were cast and put out, for the lions at the time represented strength, courage, and valor of law enforcement officers, and they symbolize the protective role of law enforcement officers. You can actually search National Police Memorial. It's a tour. You can go in and zoom in on the walls. I've attempted to make calls to them. I haven't been able to get a pickup to see if I could actually get the image of Patrolman McCormick's name on there. I think, again, they're just running behind with getting that stuff updated. The memorial contains more than 21,000 names dating back to 1786. New names are added each year in May during the Police Memorial Week. So hopefully by next year, the time we get out there, we can actually get some close-up images and some rubbings, or anybody visits DC, they might be able to go and see part of Oakwood's history there in DC. As Chief alluded to, on May 15th, the Cable Council did a wonderful job of presenting the Caravan of Lights, and we'll go ahead and show you the Cable Council's production of that. Here is inviting police cars to come out and pay respects. They would move from our city building, was the first one, and they ended up downtown in front of the Dayton precinct downtown as well. So huge amount of surrounding agencies, including fire departments, sent apparatus to pay their final respects, since we couldn't do that in DC.
Patrol Officer Claude McCormick was born on August 15, 1895 in Atlanta, Missouri, and enlisted in the Army to fight in World War I. He served in the Army from 1917 to 1919. After his discharge, McCormick settled in Dayton, Ohio with his wife, Anna, in 1920. Claude joined the Oakwood Public Safety Department in 1929 and served the city of Oakwood as a motorcycle patrolman. On August 29, 1933, while serving the community, Officer McCormick was involved in an accident on Far Hills Avenue at Harmon Avenue. Officer McCormick received first aid at the scene, returned home to rest at 105 Patterson, the Oakwood Community Center. According to reports, Officer McCormick fell unconscious and was removed to Miami Valley Hospital, where he passed away at 11:25 p.m. on August 29th, 1933 hours. After research was conducted by members of FOP Lodge 107, it was determined that Officer McCormick has no known descendants. Current members of the Oakwood Public Safety Department felt it was their obligation to make sure that Officer McCormick's sacrifice was not forgotten and his line of duty death was properly recognized. It is with great honor to announce that on May 13, 2020, Patrol Officer Claude McCormick's name will be included on the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Wall in Washington, D.C.
Again, thank you to the Cable Council and the community members and the department members that came out to support Claude on that momentous and memorable occasion. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your support. Thank you from law enforcement officers everywhere to help us recognize Claude McCormick. And if you have any questions, I don't know.
Thank you, Lieutenant Baggett, for that presentation and all the research that you and the other PSOs did on honoring Claude McCormick. We appreciate it. As you know, we hold our entire department in very high esteem here. You guys save lives, every day, and we appreciate all your efforts. And I know I've said it before, but more than ever, we appreciate the efforts of our public safety department.
Thank you very much, and we feel that the city does support us in a great measure, so thank you for that, sir.
Thank you. If Chief Hill would like to come back to the podium, we have another presentation.
Just to kind of add just final comments on Officer McCormick, beautiful day in May that we were able to celebrate, and tonight this presentation wouldn't have happened without the efforts of Lieutenant Baggett and Officer Ortel, and I think that needs to be recognized. When you see some of the history and the documentation that they had to research, find, and present for his name to be included in a national memorial, it was a lot more than just filling out a form, signing it, and sending it in, and I think you can tell by the history and some of the documentation. So, you know, to have that as your legacy that you guys leave behind to the department, unbelievable job.